Adre go committee lesoch I sesoch a gabel adre tron humor show oes tro Microsoft Teams sang hynnu nish gar chwader. John of Kynchach geweld na microphone ag of ye oes mas toshe sin hynnu iorin de chwmische Gordon Moroch a torige le faco uni.
Lord God and Heavenly Father, we give thanks that we have this opportunity to approach the throne of grace, seeking guidance in our deliberations in our meeting today. We come to you as the one who's in control of all things and is all powerful, who just needs to whisper and the mountains melt into the sea. Lord, you have created all things in 6 days and are infinite, eternal, and unchangeable. And so we seek your guidance and ask you to pour down from on high the spirit of wisdom and understanding into our hearts as we consider these issues of importance to our communities. And we pray for our communities at this time, these times being so challenging with cost of living crisis and COVID still present in our midst. Lord, we pray for those we represent, especially those who are elderly, vulnerable, who face all these difficult challenges, especially those that affect the mental health and also our young people. Lord, we bless the chair and how he steers the business of the committee. We especially ask you to bless the vice chair in his recent wedding and wish him and his new wife every blessing in their new life together. Lord, we pray for the chief executive, the deputy chief executive, and all the officers responsible for the content and the reports that we have in front of us today. And we give thanks for their diligence and hard work that is so much appreciated. Lord, bless each decision made today, that it would better improve the lives of the people we serve, and that we fulfill our chief purpose in doing so, and that is to glorify your holy and ever blessed name. So go before us now and forgive our many sins, for Christ's sake. Amen.
Tapeletse chronische Moroch. Has je geleerd jou in realtje heeft kim da aan hynnu de stuurders had ik me lessen gehad tonneschen as u jou geleerd Before we proceed with the meeting, I'd first like to make a few intimations. As was mentioned by Mr. Murray, and as you will see, the Vice Chairman is absent from the meeting, and that's because he's gone and got himself married in the last few weeks. So we want to record our best wishes to Norman and Christine as they begin their lives together, and we look forward to him returning to duties in the near future. And our best wishes go to Christine. I'd like to make a reference, as has been done already this morning, to send our best wishes to Grant Fulton, to wish him a full and speedy recovery as he recuperates from his recent illness. I'd also like to welcome Ian Kennedy and Karine McRory, new officers, to welcome them to the first meeting of the committee. We're also pleased to announce that the Cone has appointed Warmworks as the managing agent for the Energy Efficient Scotland Insulation Scheme, formerly known as the HEAPS programme. Warmworks are in the process of setting up a local team and will be launching the new programme in October. The scheme is designed to help homeowners improve the energy efficiency of their property by offering a range of insulation measures. And we welcome this announcement, and we know there's been some time since the service ceased, but we look forward to it being operational again and improving many homes across the islands. Now we move on to the Gar Countess. Gan y chynnu, y chai y chymod yn 3 wad i'r gan y ogwys. sa sin son yntochig. Live. Na'r cwsbar cwar uj, mae ha uj ag bail an y cwsbar sy'n bi yn chwar wbrwch bachor iaib sy'n yn chwarach. Bi ffeiml mae eisiau bail yn nyfer i'r filiad y chwarach yn uj sy'n cwsbar. Yw'r un i'r bail sy'n hiwmar sy'n i gianw yn rast, le fi cwr yr maic i'r no i'r teams le fi clechcych ymhwychtan tocol waf. Jan of changes gyfer siaif ganwchych yr is rhan o chwsbar ymwch chi ys gyfer siaif y liantyn y chlechcych mae'r chai y finoch eich rhoi. Fel dyn nawn, diwri chwar y pwys, yn nawn sy'n. Ar y trwy'n gyfer fe? No. Very good. I'll take the housing items in English, if you don't mind. Item 3 is the Housing Options and Homelessness Annual Report for 22-23. The report is for noting and provides an update of housing options and homelessness issues covering the year 22-23. Lorraine Graham's going to speak to the report and answer any questions. But before she does, I want to, on behalf of the committee, like to congratulate her on a successful completion of a postgraduate diploma in housing at Stirling University. Lorraine completed the course through distance learning over the last 2 years. The qualification enables Lorraine to become a member of the Chartered Institute of Housing, the professional body for housing. So our gormous congratulations to you, Lorraine, and I'll hand over to you to take us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Thank you. Members will observe that we had quite an encouraging year for homelessness in the Outer Hebrides in 22 to 23. The numbers presenting reduced overall. We were one of only 6 authorities in Scotland that saw a reduction in homelessness, so we were very much bucking the trend there. And the lengths of stay in temporary accommodation reduced, the time it took to permanently rehouse reduced, and also the backlog of people waiting for a permanent home, that backlog also reduced. That was all very encouraging. In part, the reason why the overall numbers percentage reduced was because of an inexplicable decrease in homelessness in Uist and Barra. There was no obvious reason why that happened, but unfortunately that trend has reverted this year, so that last year we had in total in Uist and Barra, we had 14 presentations for the full year. This year, from the 1st of April to date, we've had 15 presentations in Uist and Barra. So that is affecting our overall figures for this year, and we have seen an increase to date this year, which takes us back up to the position that we were in the year before last, but we'll wait to see how that continues for the rest of the year. But thankfully, that hasn't had too much of an impact on our backlog, which stays quite stagnant. It isn't reducing as much as we would have liked with the aims of rapid rehousing, but it hasn't increased, so that's positive. Part of the reason as well why the backlog is reducing is because of HHP's commitment to house more homes to single households in Stornoway who are waiting for a 1-bedroom property. Their target to accommodate 25 households in Stornoway every year, which they exceeded last year, is having an impact on reducing that backlog for 1-bedroom properties. So that's very positive. Unfortunately, we are seeing less void properties coming back for 2-bedroom properties at the moment, and the backlog for the 2-bedroom properties in Stornoway is increasing, but not enough to undo the good work at present with a reduction in numbers overall. Just to mention as well that local connection was suspended for Scotland on the 29th of November 22, and it's positive to report that that hasn't really had much of an impact locally for us at all. It has had for some authorities. It has tended to be the Central Belt and the city authorities that has impacted mostly to date. we have been protected possibly because of a boundary of waters. So where one authority might be sending homeless people to an authority nearby, where they are more likely to receive temporary accommodation, that is having a bit of an impact with local connection, but it hasn't had for ourselves to date. And that's a situation that we continue to monitor. And just with regards as well to the cost of living crisis, we haven't really seen any impact of that on homelessness to date. But again, it was anticipated that there would be a delay to that filtering through, because it does take time for debt to then grow into mortgage defaults, which may grow into the loss of a home. So that's another situation that we continue to monitor. But the picture for 22-23 with regard to homelessness was a very positive one, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lorraine. Any questions for Lorraine? This item. Quite encouraging report there. Thank you, Lorraine, and again, congratulations. The members are asked to note the report. Item 4 is the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. This report is for noting and seeks authority for the Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee to finalise the Strategic Housing Investment Plan for submission to the Scottish Government by 27th October. And Ian Watson will speak to the report and take questions afterwards.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This is our annual Strategic Housing Investment Plan. As you'll be aware, we have to submit the SHIP on an annual basis to the Scottish Government. This is an opportunity for the committee to have a look at the proposals that we're putting together. We have to submit it to the Scottish Government by the end of October, and the SHIP itself has been prepared in consultation with Hebridean Housing Partnership, who are our main partners in delivering affordable housing. And as always, we're grateful to HHP for their input and support in putting the SHIP together. The draft SHIP was also discussed at the Housing Member Officer Working Group last week. We had a good discussion at that meeting. There were just a few minor changes were suggested at the MOUG, and these have been updated in the papers you have before you just now. As with every year, the SHIP sets out a 5-year programme for developing affordable housing throughout the islands. It sets out where we'd like to see affordable housing built by HHP, and we try to make sure there's a good spread of housing throughout the geographical area of the Outer Hebrides. The 5-year period I mentioned, years 1 and 2 are normally the ones where we have the best information about the sites. We know that the land's available, that the sites are available, and it's easier to develop that. But years 3, 4 and 5, as in previous years, is very much an estimate of what we'd like to see. And as the 5-year goes through, we would be populating these years with potential sites for bringing forward. We've also working around the basis of the resource planning assumption that we get from the Scottish Government. Every few years, they notify local authorities as to the likely funding that would be available for affordable housing. At the moment, we're working on funding for a 2-year basis, this coming financial year, 24-25, and the following year, 25-26. And for the purposes of the SHIP, we've estimated a figure for the final 3 years of £5 million per year. That gives a total potential programme of 16.8 million that's been confirmed through the resource planning assumption, and an estimated of 15 million for the remaining, or for the final 3 years. Within the report, section 7.2 sets out a number of considerations and issues that we've had to take into account in preparing the SHIP this year. These are similar to the kind of issues we dealt with in previous years, so I'm sure members will be familiar with them. But just go through them very quickly. The first one's looking at the rural Stornoway split. Members will recall we had a good debate about it at the June series of meetings, and we also discussed it at the MOUG last week as well. You might recall at the last committee meeting, the chair suggested it goes back to the MOUG for discussion and consideration. So the MOUG's view last week was that the 55 rural and 45 Stornoway split should remain the way it is. The second bullet point at section Point 2 is the resource planning assumption, which I've mentioned. We have RPA in place for years 1 and 2 with an estimate for years 3, 4 and 5. And we anticipate next spring we'll get the next resource planning assumption from the Scottish Government if all goes well. Also within the preparation for the SHIP, we've taken account of innovative approaches to housing. These focus on 2 main things. The first one's looking to see if empty houses could be brought back into use. And TIG have been carrying out some work on behalf of the council, looking at the potential for that. TIG have also been asked to look at the partnership support for regeneration scheme as well, and they're currently engaged in discussing this with local builders to see if any of the local firms would be interested in taking these houses forward. The next bullet point, this is availability of suitable land, and this remains a challenge. You'll know from previous SHIPs that this has been a key issue for us, trying to find land that's suitable for housing. It's a lot of work goes into between ourselves, TIG and HHP, but it still is quite challenging to find sites that can be suitably developed for housing. We've also taken account of the rapid rehousing initiative that Lorraine would have made reference to in our previous report. We've also taken account of the development and construction costs, which are very high at the moment. And we've also factored in consideration of economic development opportunities, which will be coming the way of the islands in the not too distant future. Things like the interconnector and the offshore wind turbines. These will require a supply of housing during the construction phase, but they'll also need housing for the operational phase as well. So as you'll be aware, we're currently developing the next local housing strategy for the Comhairle, and that particular issue will feature quite strongly in the next local housing strategy to make sure that we're well placed for taking the most for these opportunities. The SHIP is also focused on population retention. Members will be no doubt aware of the census figures that came out recently showing the dip in the population. So again, we're trying to make sure that housing plays an active role in trying to retain the population of the islands. And the final bullet point there was taking account of the current local housing strategy, but also with one eye to the next local housing strategy, which will be coming to you next year. So the draft SHIP before you just now, that's proposing 234 units spread throughout the whole of the Outer Hebrides. The later years are very much an estimate, and they will probably change in the course of the next year or two. But I think it's important to flag them up at this moment so you can see this of the broad intention of where we'd like to see affordable housing getting constructed. The appendix to this report sets out the actual narrative of the SHIP, and this is one of the key documents we have to submit to the Scottish Government. It sets out the strategic context that we operate in, as well as the operating environment. And it looks at the bullet points at 7.2 of the report in a bit more detail as well. The report also makes a recommendation that delegate authority is given to the Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with the Chair to finalise the SHIP before we send it away to the Scottish Government at the end of October next month. Happy to take any questions the committee might have, Chair.
Thank you, Sir Watson. Any questions on this item? Mr. McLean.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not on your committee, but could I ask just a number of questions of Mr. Watson? First of all, you talk about the 55 to 45 split remaining because of a decision made at the Moog. What was that based on? I'm not wanting to say that was based on a decision that was made before, but I would like to know whether it was for need or land availability. And supplementary to that would be we've discussed it as well as to what the Stornoway area entails, and does it entail what we would call the rural areas of Laxdale and Sandwich?
Okay, thanks, Chair. You recall the discussion, the quite lengthy discussion we had at the June season meetings about the rural-urban split. And there's a very good discussion in the chamber. I think that the strong view at the end of that meeting was that the 55 rural, 45 Stornoway should be kept. And at that stage, the Chair suggested it goes to Moog for a final look at before it comes back to committee. So in doing that, we ran through a number of issues that we thought was worthwhile considering in looking at the split. And I refer to some of these in my as I presented this report. But I was looking at things like the availability of land, the cost of developing affordable housing, which has gone up substantially over the last year since we last submitted the SHIP. But we also looked at things like the issues of population retention and trying to make sure that housing plays an active part in retaining people or even growing growing population in the rural areas. So it was there was quite a number of things looked at the MOUG, very similar to the kind of things we looked at in June in this chamber as well. And I think the very strong view was that the 55-45 should be kept, as it does support the rural areas, but also it does take account of the significant demand for housing in the Stornoway area as well, where most of the waiting list is for Stornoway. But I think the MOUG and the committee have taken on board the way housing can support a fragile community in rural areas. With regard to the actual definition of the Stornoway housing market area, again, this was discussed in June, and we had a wee discussion about it at the MOUG as well. And before, the Stornoway housing market area included Point and most of Broad Bay, and that was largely down to trying to make the Stornoway housing market area as close to a mainland one for the purposes of the Scottish Government's national coverage of housing market areas. But we felt that it would make more sense to have Stornoway purely as Stornoway to avoid that confusion. And we had a number of discussions about how to set that boundary, but we thought the most appropriate one was just to use the two Stornoway wards as they are. So the geographic boundaries of the two Stornoway wards would cover the Stornoway housing market area. So it would include all of the old borough of Stornoway, but a significant part of Newmarket, for example, that would fall within the Stornoway area as well. And down as far, I think, down to the airport, that would be classed as Stornoway as well. And beyond that would be rural. I hope that answers your question.
It does, but in taking it at a MOUG, it comes back to the committee, which is today, which is the time to debate that.
Yes.
And we agree with Chair.
Yes.
So I'm just opening up for debate, because certainly as a native of Laxdale, I never ever considered myself as a Stornowegian. So neither would I consider myself, because Gordon Murray seems to represent my area, that I would say that he's still living in Stornoway and he's a Stornowegian, but he's definitely not a Laxdalian. So I'm sure Mr. McCormack has got the same problems down in his area, and whether it's because I would say that Sandwick was never a Stornoway place. So I dispute that. And I don't know if anybody else does as well, but I dispute that the area. I still have a wee bit of a problem with the difference between population retention and need. Over the last, how many years has 2018? Am I correct in saying that since we started with this housing idea of was it 2018?
17, I would say.
17.
Of the last term.
That's 6 years ago. Have we been successful in these 6 years in the situation that we're in of 45, 55 of retaining of population retention in our outlying districts? And I would say, going by the statistics that I see, we haven't. But I could be corrected on that. So therefore, what we've been doing for the last 6 years, in what Mr. Watson has said, at which he's been, it's the MOUG or we ourselves that are actually giving it to Mr. Watson, is that we're saying that this is one of the reasons for population retention. And over the last 6 years, I see a population within. I'm not saying that I like to see it. I don't like to see the way that the population is happening in our outlying rural districts. I don't like to see it. Is it a case because of housing? That's another question, I would say. Is it a case because of availability of housing? I don't think it is. It's an availability of work opportunities. and keeping our young in these places. But I'm just putting that as an argument, and I'm just putting that forward today in the discussion that we have, both at this business about 45 to 55. I think with the amount of housing, the demand of housing within the Stornoway area and the outlying areas of Point, and I certainly, having taught in Point for X decades, I would say that they are certainly not a Stornoway borough, and neither is Back a Stornoway borough. So I would say to us, it's time that we looked at that and we looked at the area, and I contest the fact what the MOG agreed last week. I would here contest that decision should be rescinded.
And what are you suggesting? You replace the 55-45 with Mr. McLean? Are you saying there should be a redistribution in terms of the ratio that's been suggested from the 55 to 45? I mean, that's been the policy since 2017, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of the ship.
I would certainly be looking at a possibility of 50-50, I think. But my contention, and first of all,
Sorry.
my contention is that these areas, outlying areas from Sandwick down to Aird Point, and from outside Laxdale, as we used to call it, Dundougal's Brae, down to Tolsta, should be in the rural district.
Where they are, Tolsta.
Well, I'm saying to Grace.
And Back. It's all since the last committee meeting that the market area has changed. So that our own area is in the rural area and Points.
Does it spread as far as Tongue?
Yes.
So it's just Laxdale.
It's the definition that's coming, as Mr. Watson made clear, is the two Stornoway wards.
Yeah.
Becomes the Stornoway market area.
I see. So, but what I'm saying is that the Laxdale area was never in the Stornoway area.
I mean, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of factors that are, that aspiration of that split and wanting to build more houses in rural areas. But what invariably happens, there is a demand for more housing in Stornoway, and invariably land comes up for that opportunity more often than not. And the challenge has been over the years is to identify sites and land in rural areas to build, to meet that aspiration and ambition we have of building more homes in rural areas. It's a real challenge, but I think it's right that we continue with that. And if land comes up, we build wherever the opportunity comes up.
I agree with that principle, but I still maintain that the town area is the town area.
I can see where you're coming from in that respect, Mr. McLean. Anyone else want to come in? Yeah, Mr. McCormick.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Mr. McLean, I sat in on the MOG last week and eventually compromised on the decision that was taken there. But I 100% agree with you. And I've been arguing this issue for many, many years. I am reluctant to see another 150 houses built in Sandwick, which is what is going to happen probably. I would far rather they were built in the rural areas. But the biggest problem we've had there is that there just is nowhere to build them. We are not having much success in persuading rural areas to offer us sites where we might build housing. And HHP's contribution last week was to say we have to build houses to meet up with the targets that are set us, and we can only build the houses where the ground is available for us to build them. So if we can build 150 houses in Sandwick, that's what we're going to do. And I don't like that as a policy personally, but on the other hand, we do need the housing. We're in a huge cleft stick here. I just haven't an idea how to resolve it. We've worked so hard over the years to try and find locations to build houses, to try and come to deals with grazing committees and community organisations to try and persuade them to offer us parcels of ground. But they're most reluctant to give up parcels of ground. And I recognise that even in my own area as well. People are very reluctant. And in Sandwich, there is the portion of ground beside where the school was, and there's another portion down by the airport gate, which would take significant numbers of houses. And it would be within the ward, certainly, but I've always considered that to be rural, right enough. But at the same time, we're in danger of having Stornoway travelling in terms of housing all the way from Stornoway to Point. You could have houses everywhere, the way things are going. And my own Grayson's committee is very much opposed to giving up sites for housing because it's a working Grayson's committee. They have a very good Grayson's and they have plenty of cattle and sheep. So they have a very good argument, I would say, and I can see how that same argument would be used throughout the islands. I just don't know. I mean, the Moog just came to a reluctant compromise, I think, really. And I think we recognise the points that you made, certainly, but I don't think anybody could come up with a better suggestion than the one that we had. That doesn't help matters one little bit.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. I think we have to re-engage with our community landlords and Grayson's committees again in this round, going forward to try and free up land for housing. The Empty Homes Initiative is another avenue certainly we can pursue in terms of meeting the housing need, and at the same time, as you know, there are many empty homes in rural areas that could be used for refurbishment and rehousing people. Mr. Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to the discussions, I wanted to ask, it is very frustrating, but I still think it's almost like top-down decision-making that we're imposing stuff on communities that maybe don't want housing, as Councillor McCormick mentioned, but have we really utilised the local place plans as much as possible, which are really community-led plans that let communities actually, actively plan for their future? That's a great mechanism to get communities to think about land and to work together rather than having us, maybe impose or try and force housing on communities that don't want it, and allow other communities to put forward plans where they can tell us what kind of houses they need, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, etc., how many houses, and maybe come up with the land themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I'll ask Mr. Morton to come in.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to answer the points from Councillor Murray. I don't think we've come across a community saying we don't want houses. We get a very strong message from communities throughout the island saying, you haven't built houses here for 40 years, we need houses. So we're getting a strong message from the communities and the community landlords that the housing's needed more or less throughout the islands, from Ness all the way down to Varsay. So that's something we take on board when we're putting the ship together. As you said yourself, some of the grazing committees, obviously housing's not their priority. They've got other things to deal with. So we know a few had been approached and said, no, we're not interested because the land has been used for agricultural purposes, and that's fair enough in terms of what the Grazing Committee do. But we certainly work very closely with our colleagues in planning about active places and engaging with communities through things like the housing land audit, where we work very closely with the planners to come up with a supply of land for a 5-year period, and that ties in very closely with the ship, but also with the local housing strategy as well. So that's an active and ongoing bit of work we do with the planners to engage with the communities. And we do have a good working relationship with the community landowners throughout the islands as well. We have a representative from the community landowners sitting on the council's housing market partnership, so we can feed back to them and they can feed into us. So that is working really well. But one of the things I was going to mention was, as you know, we're looking at the next local housing strategy. That's the key housing strategy that the council produces, and a sizable part of that will be looking at the housing supply target for where we think we'll need houses, where the demand for houses will be over the life of the local housing strategy. So that'll be looked at between now and the spring, hopefully, with a view to reporting back to this committee later next year. But that should give us a good idea of where the land is needed, where the houses are needed most throughout the islands, as well as Tanimachin, where the land has been identified. And obviously we'll work very closely with HHP, our main partners, in looking at that as well. But it's probably quite good timing for preparing the ship, and this discussion we've had just now, that the local housing strategy is going through its preparation just now, and it's a good opportunity to take that kind of feedback from yourselves as the committee, but also from community groups as well. And we will have quite a fair bit of detailed consultation with the communities early next year, between early next year and the summer probably. So hopefully that'll get some good feedback from every village or township throughout the islands, and that will help inform the local housing strategy, but also future ships.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Mr. MacLeod.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come in on his point there? It's Councillor Murray. Just can I just respond to Mr. Watson's point?
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry. Just a very quick question. When you talk about, community engagement, what form does that take? Is it a community meeting, or is it just emails getting sent out, or is it an advert in the paper? I'm thinking about the Comhairle, maybe looking at how other councils do things like participatory budgeting, where they have, a large open community meeting going on, rather than maybe speaking to grazings clerks or that. They maybe open it up to the whole community. Can you tell me how you engage with the community when you're discussing these matters?
Mr. Watson. Jan. Sorry.
Oh, that's me now. Yeah. Thanks. Yes, we will be looking at as wide a range of mechanisms as possible for the consultation with the communities. We're also looking very closely at other councils who have gone through the local housing strategy process just a wee bit before us, to get some ideas of how they've gone out and reached out to communities to find out what's available. So some of the things that we're looking at the moment would be like online service like SurveyMonkey, which we've tried in the past, but also meetings with the community either through the day or in the evenings, to try and get as much feedback as possible. We think it's really important to get as much information back from the communities to shape the local housing strategy. So we're happy to look at any mechanism that brings information in to help advise the development of the next local housing strategy. But we'd be happy to come back with like a program of consultation for the committee in the future, so you're aware of what we're doing and the kind of information we're hoping to get back of the communities.
Thank you. I'm going to bring the Chief Executive in on that very point.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add for information, the area forums are also very useful in that regard, whether they're constituted or not, because they bring together all the groups in a particular area. Participatory budgeting is something we intend to revive. It wouldn't be suitable for this because you need a fixed budget and a fixed proposal for a community to take away and dissect and react to. But we've used it very successfully in the past, as members are aware, and we intend to revive that for certain specific services, subject to P&R's agreement. Thank you, Chair.
And participatory budgeting is part of our corporate strategy as well. Mr. MacLeod, John Norman MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a quick question for Eilean, Mr. Watson. I'm just wondering if he could be able to let me know, obviously not today, but maybe in the next week or so, over in our own ward, next to Dalbug, the Siar, I guess, Nish. I'd like to ask him if he could tell me which grazing committees have refused to give land for housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clyde. I'm sure Mr. Watson will be in touch with you with a response to that inquiry. Mr. McInnes.
Yeah, it's just following up, from what's happening in rural areas, because when we were discussing at CLLD, various applications that we did have were from rural areas, and it was with regards to sites which they considered suitable for housing. However, HHP didn't consider them suitable for housing, and was coming very clear that this was a pattern. I'm not sure, is it just specific to rural areas, but what they were implying was, despite having them refusing them, those sites were developed by private operators later on. So what I'd like to know is HHP rejecting or refusing more sites in rural areas for development and saying they're not fit for development than they are in Stornoway or surrounding areas? I'm not sure what the reason was, but it was coming from Harris in particular and from Used when the discussions were taking place at CLLD.
Watson, do you want to come back to that?
Thanks, Chair. As I mentioned, we work very closely with HSP in looking for suitable sites, and it's actually very much a partnership approach we take with HSP. The staff from the housing team work with the development team in HSP looking at land, and that takes up a substantial amount of time for the housing team. And what we tend to do is, once land's brought to our attention, we jointly commission a feasibility study, and that looks in a great deal of detail into see whether the site can be developed. And a lot of sites, they might not suit social housing because of the extra things that are needed, like payments, lampposts and things like that. And some of these sites could be developed for private use. And we know quite a few have seen private properties built in them, but they are different from a social housing development. So that could be one of the reasons why it might not have been suitable for a social housing development. And the other thing that keeps creeping up in the feasibility studies is just the physical makeup of the land that's brought to our attention. Usually solid rock or deep peat or flood risk, that's becoming quite an issue in the assessment of suitable land. So there is a lot of land brought to our attention, but once you go through the process, quite a lot falls off because it's not suitable for it. Not that long ago, it would have been more chance to develop some of these sites because funding was more plentiful, but things are a lot tighter now and it costs much more. Costs have gone up quite substantially as well. So sites that might have been developable 5-10 years ago just aren't at the moment. They might be in the future, but certainly in recent years, it's been a bit of a struggle. So it's very detailed feasibilities are carried out on each site that's brought to our attention, and there's usually a good reason why HSP aren't able to take it forward. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick and then Mr. Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Chair. There were a number of issues mentioned at the Moog which clearly don't appear in this report because this report is for a specific purpose. But I'd like to mention one of them, and the one that troubles me quite a bit is the future developments that are going to take place in the islands. I think the Deputy Chief Executive said that the first of these will be the interconnector itself, perhaps requiring 1,000 people to be housed somewhere in our islands for that work to go ahead. I think, that, and we've also had an indication from the offshore wind company that their number of people would be maybe in the region of 1,500 people. And then we've got the other 3 wind farms as well. So there's a lot of people going to be coming to the islands to do the work for us. That's going to have to be featured in the report that we look at in this chamber. I understand we're going to continue with what we do in the ship, but we'll have to deal and we'll have to work with these organisations. I think I'm right in saying, Mr. McKeever, that you suggested that the onus would be on these companies to find their own accommodation. But I would very much like to think that they would work with us in terms of doing that, in terms of where they would site their accommodations and such like, and what it's likely to be. I have, I can remember in the past that we've had work camps I remember them in Sandwich myself when I was a lot younger. They weren't exactly all that popular. So I would want to safeguard our own population against any difficult situations for them. And it's going to be all part of whatever housing strategy we're going to have going forward in the future.
Absolutely, Mr. McCormick. The huge challenge ahead with the demand there's going to be for housing with the developments that are going to be taking place over the next number of years. And I think the discussions are already taking place with developers, as Mr. McKeever, not that I was at the meeting at the MOUG, but I think Mr. McKeever made clear that these discussions were already taking place, and you can clarify that.
That's right, Chairman. We've initiated a work stream with the major developers to look at their accommodation requirements. These developers are already looking to see what their requirements are, and these requirements, there are a number of ideas being developed. So there will be a work stream in its own right that will look solely at accommodation, and that will be advancing over the next number of weeks. As you say, there will be significant levels of labour required over the period from 2026 out to 2030. But I think we've got to disaggregate that, as Mr. McCormack said, away from the affordable housing programme, because the two things will be completely different, and the affordable housing programme will not be a route to assist these developers. So there will be a funding stream going on. Just to comment on the broader discussion, I think Mr. McLean said a decision was taken at the MOUG. Well, the MOUG just brings our recommendation to this committee, and it's up to the committee to come to a decision, and up to the coroner to come to a decision. I think, as Mr. Watson said at the last committee, we agreed that the two Stornoway housing wards, the two Stornoway wards would form the Stornoway housing market area. I recognise Mr. McLean is looking for a bit more further refining of that, but it will be challenging to see where you put the boundary. And I think that the two wards work, make a good set of boundaries that we can work with. I think looking at the 45-55 split, I think that there is always going to be a bit of tension and a bit of debate around what the proper figure is and what the correct figure is. I always would like to hope that Cornwall, Neil and Siar is always signalling that we want to see build happening in our most peripheral communities, and that we want to support our most peripheral communities. And I think giving a signal to the contrary to that would probably be a mistake. But I think we've got to recognise as well that a significant amount of the demand is around Stornoway, and that we've got to find a way to support our most peripheral communities while ensuring need around Stornoway is also met. So I think we need to put the signal there that we do want to see the majority of the houses being in our rural communities, but being opportunity driven around Stornoway. And if a good project emerges around Stornoway, we're not pushing that project back to meet an artificial set of target figures. So I think we need to keep the market signal that we are looking to prioritise our rural areas, but be opportunity driven around Stornoway, and take up any new opportunities as and when they arise.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Anyone else? Mr. Mackenzie, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Well, points I was going to raise, actually, I think have been pretty well covered, but since I was going to say something, was really, I think Mr. McCormack has raised a very important point, and I think it's a major situation that we're facing. I would like to see a seminar on this, and bring all the factors in, because, if we're talking about 2026, it's only 2 years away, and we're talking about huge numbers of housing, and the impression I get is you're going to get 1,000, 2,000 people coming in, and then 4 years later they're going. So you've got to find accommodation for them, either on a temporary situation or a permanent situation for those that are, looking for housing and from our local housing list. So I would like to see a seminar on the point that have been raised, because, it's going to be on us very quickly. Thank you. I'm in favour of the 45, 55, by the way. I agree that's the way it should be. There was another point actually on that particular thing. I think maybe Mr. Watson could advise me on the situation where there was a requirement for the money to be spent that we received in a certain, the 40-odd million, by a certain time, and I know this was possibly extended. But what is this current situation, and how dependent is this on getting sites? And are we prepared? I think it was mentioned in the past that if we go over the 45 for the Stornoway area, because the sites are there at the time, and the money's there, and that we won't lose the money at the end of the day, then we should do so. So can I have further information on that, and possibly on the seminar possibility?
But I understand the seminar will be taking place in due course to look at the issues that you've raised, that are of interest to all of us. Mr. Watson.
Thanks, Chair. With regard to the funding, I made reference to the resource planning assumption that we get from the Scottish Government, and we have 2 years confirmed where we'll be getting the resource planning assumption in place for 24-25 and 25-26. So that covers the first 2 years of the SHIP we're looking at just now. But for years 3, 4 and 5, the Scottish Government haven't been able to give us a resource planning assumption yet. That's probably going to be next spring before we get that. And so we don't know what's likely to be available then. But from talking to the Scottish Government team in Inverness, they were suggesting, for the purposes of getting the SHIP planned out at this stage, to take an estimate of what we think will be available for years 3, 4 and 5. So we've taken £5 million a year for the last 3 years of the SHIP. It might be more, it might be less. We just don't know at this stage. But for the sake of planning the SHIP just now, we had to have something that we could work around. So like I'm saying, we'll know next spring, hopefully, what the funding will be for maybe the next 2 years of the SHIP. But the kind of money we're looking at just now, we've got £16.8 million confirmed through the resource planning assumption, and that's money that would be made available if sites were identified and HSP were able to develop them. Again, just for saying that's not money the council gets. That's actually money set aside that can be drawn down as and when a site becomes available and is suitable for developing. So we know the 16.8 million is definitely there, and we're working around an estimate of 15 million for the last 3 years. So that would give us, well, I see now, that'll be just over the 30 million for the 5 years of the SHIP. But it's based very much on a guess at this stage. But we'll have more information in the spring of next year. And just in making reference to protecting the money, if a development is taken forward by HHP, there's usually ongoing discussions with the Scottish Government as we go through this process with ourselves and HHP. So once that's been approved by the Scottish Government, that funding is secured for that particular site. So if there's a delay in the site, for example, that funding should still be there for the HHP to use. And there have been slippages in the past in the programme due to unforeseen circumstances. But once a site is approved, then the funding is likely to be there all the way forward. But for most of the SHIP, we're working around an estimate of what might be available. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That does answer the question for the future. For the past ship, what was the situation? Were we able to make full use of it?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Can you speak into the microphone, Mr. Mackenzie, please?
For the last ship, were we able to make full use of it?
If you recall last year when we presented the ship, we were looking at, we had 3 years of resource planning assumption, and the third year was about 8.5 million. So for last year and the previous years, the advice from the Scottish Government had been to take the last year's RPA and use that for the remaining years. So when we did that gives the 43 million pounds on the ship. But again, that was just a guesstimate of what might be available. So this time round, again, based on the advice from the Scottish Government, we know that there's 16 million is confirmed, and the 15 million is an estimate. So in terms of the actual spend in the programme, the most up-to-date information we have from the Scottish Government and HHP is this year's spend. It's around about the £5 million mark. And next year's spend, it's estimated to be about 8.6 million. So that's good, healthy spend going through this year and next year from the work that's ongoing at the moment. But it's an ongoing process. The developments can run over more than one financial year, so it's hard to have an actual amount for a specific year. But certainly the latest figures we've got from HHP are showing healthy spend.
Watson? Mr. McLean?
So just, it would be 2 minutes. I know I'm taking up a bit of time in actually raising this in the first place, but the fear that I had when I was on about it, and I take what Mr. McCormack says with a compromise, and I'm glad there has been a compromise of some sorts, but it doesn't alleviate the problems around the Stornoway. We don't have that, but it was to do with a 55 to 45 split in just what Mr. Mackenzie was alluding to, is to actually, was it being spent? In other words, we know we've got projects that are both into the Stornoway area and also in the Harris area that are there ready to go. And I was saying to them, and there seems to have been a hold up over these in the last year or two, and that has come to us through the contractors who say they're ready to go. They haven't got any work. They're desperate to get going, and they have to lay off. Whereas, and we know we've got projects, and we had projects within the Stornoway area, which if we went ahead with them, we would have gone over the 45. But what you said earlier, Mr. Chair, is that you said where there is the need and the demand and the availability, we will go ahead. Have we got that assurance here that where there is the need, where there is the demand for housing, and we know in certain parts, whether it's rural or urban, within the Stornoway area, we've got that demand is there, and they are ready to go. Contractors are ready to go, and we got the assurance from here is that will the 55% or the 45% won't stop us from going ahead. And just
it shouldn't.
Thanks, Chair. That's the key question, and you probably recall it was debated in great detail back in June. We could spend all the money, in a year, 18 months if we built house in Stornoway. There's no doubt about that. There's so much land. There's so many willing contractors waiting out there. That would not be a problem. We could spend the money, and a good bit more beside. But we've got to take account of the decision of the Comhairle to support the rural areas as well. So there's no doubt that there's enough sites and enough willing partners to spend a huge chunk of money. The next year, probably the next 18 months, I would imagine a lot could be spent. But that would mean you wouldn't get the same input into the rural areas, which a lot of them are fragile. They are crying out for housing, and in quite a number of areas. Local firms are really struggling because they can't retain the workforce. So I think any houses we build in rural areas will have a positive impact on that.
Sorry for coming in again, but what I'm worried about is that even in the rural areas, They are not. You are not going ahead with the building there in order to hold that to use up that 45%. So that's what I'm saying. That there seems to be a log jam there as well.
Yeah.
And that means there's a log jam in spending the money that is available. In other words, are we then spending the money that we've been given? Do you want to?
Without a doubt, Chair, there are significant additional projects around Stornoway that we could look to accelerate and move forward fairly quickly. As Mr. McLean said, there are developers there with projects. The policy guidance the Comhairle have given us is 45-55, and to make that work, we have been holding projects in Stornoway back. If the signal now from the committee and the guidance from the committee is yes, we want to keep the focus on rural areas, but we don't want to hold back Stornoway projects, then yes, we can accelerate projects. But without a doubt, we have been holding back Stornoway projects to ensure that the policy goal of the Comhairle has been met.
Absolutely. I mean, if land comes up, we should take advantage and use it and build on that land, because there is a need and a demand for it. Absolutely. But our aspiration, surely, as Mr. McKeever pointed out earlier, is as a Comhairle that we should be looking to build more homes in rural areas where we want to tackle depopulation, create jobs. And we've also got the challenge coming down the line of these major developments taking place, where there's going to be further demand for housing, which is out with the ship, of course. And a seminar will be held on that, hopefully in due course. But we're here today to decide the recommendations before us. And the MOUG had a good, robust. Sorry, Leader, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just briefly, you touched on a couple of points yourself at the end there. But the one point I would say is that by changing the boundaries, we've actually made the 45 in the Stornoway area larger. So we're spending 45% of the budget in 2 wards, and we're spending 55% in 9 wards. So you've taken point and back out, so you've kind of reduced the area. So there will be more spend in the Stornoway area, even though it's still 45. So there will be that investment, and we'll be able to take forward those projects that have not been sitting on the shelf, but ready to go.
Okay, thanks. And I think going forward, we still got the local housing strategy to develop and to inform that. And I think a lot of discussion today will go towards formulating that strategy for going ahead. But for the time being, for today, we're asked to agree the recommendations at 3.1. Sorry, Mustafa. I can't see you. I can't see.
Thanks, Phil. I'm just hiding behind here. Thanks very much, Chair. It was just following from what Colleen McKeever was saying, Deputy Chair. I think we're all happy to accelerate project instead of delaying project when they. But I think also I would like to an assurances that this is not going to be just a vehicle to then spend all the money and forget about the rural areas, especially like the likes of down in Euston Barra. Because sometimes if that's the reason, we can just accelerate, and like Mr. Watson said, we can spend all the money in Stornoway very quickly if we need to. So we just would like the committee to bear that in mind.
Do you want to comment on that, Mr. McKeever?
I think, Chair, the reassurances in the SHIP document as presented, because as presented at the moment, it still shows more or less 55-45 split. And you can see from the table in the appendix where these projects are anticipated. So that is the SHIP we will be looking to develop, but with the understanding that if projects come forward in Stornoway, we can work with these projects as well to accelerate.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for your contributions, and the recommendations are 3.1 for your agreement. Thank you. Item 5 is the Annual Assurance Statement 2023. The report seeks approval of the Annual Assurance Statement detailed in Appendix 1 to the report for submission to the Scottish Housing Regulator by the 31st of October this year. And Angela Smith will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll be aware that this is a regular report that comes to you every September in respect of landlord services that the Comhairle provides. We're not a a landlord like HHP any longer. We've obviously gone through stock transfer, but there are a number of properties that we do supply landlord services for, namely the acres. There's one ex-education department property, and there are 14 homeless properties as well. So we provide landlord services in respect of these, and the Scottish Housing Regulator requires assurance every year that we are compliant with regulatory standards in respect of the services that we offer and we provide. This year they were asking for additional assurance in respect of tenant and resident safety. So if you turn to the appendix to the report, we've reviewed all the works that have been carried out, and you can see that of these properties, some certificates have expired. There are 2 properties requiring fit testing, calorifier and Legionella risk assessment, and 8 properties requiring Legionella risk assessment. These will be carried out to tender at the moment, and they'll be carried out, and the tender should be returning between October and November, and works to rectify these certificates will be carried out immediately thereafter. So we can give assurance to the regulator that at the moment that this is the situation we have, and we will return to them to advise them of when the works have been carried out. So happy to take any questions on that if there's any.
Angela, any questions from members? If not, recommendation of 3.1 for your agreement. Thank you. Isin goes up to Cusper Siar, Jawabchi, Ash Gishaw, Geori on Becher, Comhairle Realtus na Hamabe, Trainig, Mianchoch, Jawaf, Doveil, Drech, Record, Ogerle, Officer, as Hirschen, Skriver, en Ashak. Samorak, the Shosson, Brindische, Ash.
Okay. The Planning Scotland Act 2019 included a legislative provision to impose training requirements on planning authorities in Scotland. As members will be aware, at present the Comhairle, in common with other planning authorities, do undertake planning training for elected members on a voluntary basis, the purpose of which is to ensure members have the knowledge to develop both local and strategic planning, and also the knowledge and confidence to undertake planning decisions within the statutory and policy framework. Prior to enacting the provision of the 2019 Act, the Government has issued a consultation document to planning authorities and to the wider public entitled Mandatory Training on Planning for Elected Members. The Government are seeking input from planning authorities and the wider public as to the scope of mandatory training, who should be required to undertake the training, the topics to be covered, how and by whom training should be delivered, whether members should be tested on their knowledge, the duration of training, the timing of training, and subsequent monitoring. The appendix to your report sets out a draft response to that consultation document. The Chief Executive, in his briefing to members in August, did draw members' attention to the consultation document and invited any input. The recommendation is for I've got the wrong report in front of me. The recommendation is set out in the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Let's work. Kirsten Sibek, Daniel. Naam sure. Hat training go be on son buil nach deur training gehast. Harach me. Kunja schon gavalage.
Ba data can the viat shaw a hat pulling and which is more of a gairi chinaun. So had ashle leis a Comhairle coit son data le maguchi chilling and avias.
Oké, zo'n koenetje naar deuring hormen, klinike, geinig, tossige, heen. Lewa, zo als je, toch zo'n visrogig. Is goes het go kusper schech. Gemme panel jettergie 2023. Sorry?
Sorry.
Natürlich.
Thank you, Chair. This is
I mean,
just.
sorry, we're going to
Sorry.
have clear recommendations for that item 6 there at 3.1. Papeleis. Was het go kusper schech? Nice short toward Fistrachig, Skimmer Plan Lessergie 2023, toward Fistrachig Kokonige, een recht Adisch Compartachig, de Skimmer Plan Lessergie 2023. Hij is schierig unte regionalisch Compartachig, maar ha minitje anders paskrierig naast. Hij is hana Morrison en Shawson Fraggert, is se be hacker.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a report back following on from the consultation undertaken from the Development Plan Scheme report presented at the June series. The Development Plan Scheme sets out a programme of work to maintain and deliver the current and new local development plan, with the associated participation statement setting out the means of engagement. It was the participation statement element that was consulted on. There were limited responses received, all from key agencies. And we didn't expect many consultations, but the ones that we did receive were positive about the approach, and accordingly no change is proposed to the draft participation statement as presented. Also to note that we've not received any further consultation responses since the report was published. The report recommends statements in paragraph 3.1, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Papeleis Sana, Kish se be en morgen eerst ik 3 punten hun is zo'n interview. Is was ik kusper ook voor gunjen Jawachi. Als je een aard afgekeerd en als je schierig unter die schema uterus, als je wie Jaravich eerder Jawachi is zo'n jesachien in het zo bechtes. Het bechen een als lijkt committee scruti even doen. Maar wil u ikke committee. Als Harish Morak en Shawson Brinish als Fraggert Kirsten se be.
I believe. Section 43 of the Town Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 as amended requires planning authorities to prepare a scheme of delegation for the determination of an appointed officer for applications for planning permission in relation to developments that are termed local developments. The scheme of delegation was first put in place in 2009. It's been reviewed at intervals of no greater than 5 years. The scheme falls due for review again. It requires to be considered by the council, and then it requires to be approved by Scottish ministers. The current scheme was adopted in 2018. It's worked very well. The scheme has been subject just to minor changes, and it is attached as Appendix 1 to the report, with a recommendation that the Deputy Chief Executive be authorised to submit the government to the draft scheme of delegation to Scottish ministers, and to make any amendments should Scottish ministers come back with any observations. Happy to take any questions.
Papeleis Morak, Kish se be ik weil een huspersjo. Maar heel ha mooi nek 3 punten hun is zo'n unter. Schniesig was gekusper neig ieskoch. Als naast zo kochiatjeri kochonische riotus na halve is pakrig gundunig ieskoch na silun. an yn hysgych na hawabe. Is y siedech ynter I drech ffagwrt y cwner mar ha minitje an y fas gribech yn ask. Sa een ken je toch zoals zo'n brinische ask is ffagwrt kischen so be falsch is gonna committee.
Thank you, Chair. The report highlights the vital role sand eels play in the food web, with predatory fish, seabirds, and marine mammals all being reliant on sand eel. The fishery has no commercial value locally or to the Scottish fleet and is in fact detrimental to fish stocks on the whole. The proposed coaling response is appended to the report. The recommendations are outlined in 3.1, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Alexia.
Hami dolis yn as ga sio gysgarig yn y chymad ysyn. Is y blion ysyn y galaf agos ti'n mi lai baigyd blion y das. Fan nacht yfa sio gymwr yn chrochog eith factory sion mini ysg iwloch agos fa bath sy'n y sio gan y gwylio'r alegyd ydach ar o gyhydd dyn chron y bad y janif edrych rwyd y bad y gloch agos bysyn ffwy yn ffihyd blion o'ch anil. Polach gynobidwch sy'n mihed y fi. Eg hylan yn i'r sy'n niosgach a fasio sy'n eher y barain y maiedig y fawn. Agos dyn ddech yma dy sy'n tasyn yn y blion o'ch yn asyn y ffyn gyn leis sy'n gan efo tilig. Gel mae'n anast y gra hasyn y ffyn gyn barach gadag yn y tyn sy'n y chiad blion gwn y loch y tŵf ar y mabysg af fi. Wan ysyn. Sa'n i'r tegwys yn mynd achro bwyd I ysgo hysiol gan efach yn niosgal y falaf sa'n i'n ffyn ad y tilig gan y hwysgych yn sesge tydd efo gynnat agos y cwant edord mae'n asyn y glost edord fi am yr cwant mae had ac yn gyfiawn an barach gach y tîn fi am yr cwant mae'n chorle gel torman Does y galaf sy'n ys ron o pa had y cwant I barach taich cwtym cedych I hwyd siachod agos gyharad ngwr ag heddi fi acam sydd yn yma loch y tŵr had y milion hi yn y ffeicyn gyr hyl torad ac yn di un le dwan ysyn agos chan I lyfr sy'n mi gwrthonach ag emol yn arhaid gan y flion gyr tor Bohen dolle hines sy'n ys dy blion sy'n arwyn agos chan un sy'n mar chorle man hag cwtym cedych y coenslwch gagin mar ha gyharad muskan Comhairle agus a sin fichen y firma sin a dhéanú. Sulle me gom chósgin es a frogger chuidir kon rialtas móch go hoort gewiltbarach gada kitien agus kujoch maar da had de kuanti kujum kedetje eliadige ko skiden rot de sin at sonal attachment gel sinje mar chole gemik sinje kuant gemik korme go chole kormine de kujum kedetje schon agus a chus dus kujum kedetje hakken het muskan Comhairle agus kuante de rotanage grama jen koakich Schuld gan einfach as je fichen kel rood geharig gan ich agus hadden roja de viljatach taschen in de plionchen kom oor agus hanjel kale tachart agus maar as je fichen jarien ga janu with kulekal kemichel is ioskach na mare agus e koinstukken zullen me firmer kuanti goshone han roja fin Pniavach is a barach gekal sem I hele hesse a skide agus rot genne janu man nade wach gelutige getoje chorik ha scientific schon has in je finken kujuk as nacht as in je korak maar je man loch tues kan on schöne ha da blufin tuna den wache voor je schach kon agus schöne kiolig dat waren kuat de schön voor je teich blionne das son waren kuat kan on was schöne tuniert men jelan agus hatte den istechen is agus ni schiel gan einfach hat rihes je schon pavska rihes ste skatan agus a skatan net gol komor shios man va agus sulmi kuat dort get kar ma shogen vi céineach go fesin bónach essa chasca do le siol gan afach agus garad an hórla cumat a fé a déliad agus cuitum ceteist o cáinstach gín e cúlse.
Appelleert, maar zo'n nieuws als je nog eens kunnen zien naar boord en bergen zien discussie gaan naar gewoon keer. Dat wordt uit. Is spieren kennen beide. Maar heel aan Mr. McKenzie.
One comment. With regard to the stocks, I mean, that is very welcome. But there's also another side benefit that there'll be no return to China goods.
China cuts. Short China cuts, can you? China cuts. Okay, beide kundig er is nu morgen 3 punten heen. Is niet gespreid. Unweert is nog houden. Zo'n aardiges is gescheswoch. Is zo'n vistig. Is ik hier met vuistige groen real is nog houden. Zo'n aardiges is gescheswoch. Is de solche kuchen. Kochiaatje is een heel aan hier. Series brini niet kennen toch. Is een aardig. Is regular kitchen sippy.
This pertains to the Scottish Government's vision for sustainable aquaculture. Overall, the vision is welcome. It contains fairly high-level aspirations at this stage and lacks specific detail as to how and when these will be achieved in practice. The main issues relating to the Western Isles are displacement of traditional fishing activities, debris, automation, infrastructure, freshwater sites, restoration of old sites, and the extraction of value. I'd be happy to answer any questions members may have.
Appelleert. Mr. McInnes, Curtis Chair.
Ik zie kwant en daar is in kwant gefiemel sa tuanis bratan de bigan a helan fusion codet. Tin sus go fasket leid blionen is agus. Maar ader kwant gelat firma kun klooster go usturen steine ach as in kwant aan de skid en elle gelat kwant die park januetiet kutje agus aardig getiet agus no die challesin ungane bod yn a coinstuk yn y machad sé miol yn marag a harhaid agus na stuhan had tot schon ina falla van y platen agus syle mi doladord gur gym fwydat cymad ga harhaid di cymad man as at chanele sinne janwe cheese farach agus stuhan warsan a vigat ni ganes nei hier goed gaif groeisach gro sin land o gan dusk de leinde de ha pratan fian agus smeel mar de hier dat anu sé fall schon go bunnen namin schon usk in de schon nach tucht de meelen hier agus had gemode wie garige geskuat is schon as kniewig is zo agus kus voor dusk verlachen schon nach einem Jahr als eine Partie in woorden ha schon landig aan een dusk. Ja, het een voor je dus kunnen de meer maar de tuchtje ach kunt dort agus zullen meer zich hier dacht kan ook code weer we kunt als zich hier dacht ze de omhoog kan de gooiers nog gehangen agus doise mi he kumanti man han sin community benefit in fast schon de haniken hoen is hier gestach as je vinchen gelat kumanti wat in janugus de deunje de leutige genade wat op dan ha wo nog ha tine praten zal as je jollig getiet agus as je vinchen kele woord goed kan haar garig is de helan zal valakotje het moorde ha agus as je kaul de hupprichen warke na sin vinken ik praien stone waar je zo aan je hupprichen hele komor et jidikes as ik die hebben is schon agus komor na bistet kwat die da plannen gehoord schachet kan je kiel economic janu me had de fast schon go code gadu. Aretje wie tiene tiede schon jolke schon. Agus schöne do jooste park in is gniewig is sule mikkeles het kaul wat te maken schon dagel. Tien alle garreken den kaart van de vader wil dat de garige overatan. Agus dagel men gaan een economic linkage dus stiede. Agus da mission aan een planning. Sule mikke vind binst park opprischen agus park gaan met is de skiënse aan de raast ha park geval af mag zo in de bouwen de hoosje kreeg ze wat dan voor je tijd blionnen.
Ní cochóiriche seo fel tjens in a berchen chu a astische realtas. Sorry, you can continue, man.
It's just a vision document at the moment. It's an outline of what the vision is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have mis minach get in I'm go cormaun over green in the county mention. Has I'm at yes by contra I can draw. Stoch o chia shech gebli origin last. Schar wat het jori green on dois min my een voor nog een coins nog. Aan de county in but at the yalletje is. So mis minach gewil I'm on green du reached. Ex vi green du leash me voor nog een coins nog. Is timmer hat of gepaarok wo economic rasse sterk en Eilean is mijn kunst nog in vast laten gaan over koper. Zo get nach alle show rochadig van de realtors. Heb ik me ook nog over een goal knieën van een goeie nog over een voorskul brein is in de campaign is zijn toosige brein nu is met een voor nog kunst nog vinden de ha kormach als mijn pionier in die.
Dus een schöne Janik in Hakke. Okay, maar veel pijlen se bier curry.
Thank you very much. I think the Deputy Chief Executive has possibly addressed the matter I was going to raise in 8.1, the final paragraph, where the example of Colonsay Community Development Company is referred to. I mean, that looks like a very positive way to go about things if we're going to get housing out of it. Another man for you to talk to, Ian. But I think that's kind of what you're suggesting, Calmian. Yes, that seems a very good idea. Yeah, they're making a lot of money. Yeah.
Okay, tappel so na boil kuntugur sin ask tord van jaar. Tappel Ní se goas go haaskin lesach economicoch. Go inwoch paas bier in is gauw en as sosirig unte die inwoch faas bier in is gauw maar ha minitje aan het haskriwig nask. Is hamurg makai so brinische ask is frakkeria kischen se bierhak.
Thank you. This short report follows on from the report that was presented to the committee in December 2021, and it follows a consultation that was held with partners in the third sector who carried out the consultation on our behalf. And the two appendices outline both the strategy and the consultation process and results that are detailed. And you'll see from the conclusion at 7.1 that is to work with community groups and other third sector health and community land interests to adopt and advance the priorities that have been outlined and identified. And indeed, the Comhairle is already working quite closely with those sectors in the Eilean Steel Strand, where there are food hubs planned over the next decade. And concurrent to this consultation, the Taxa Uist also carried out a consultation specific to Eust and Barra called Our Right to Food, and it's a very good report as well that details some of the challenges that were specific to Eust and Barra but apply equally to other parts of the islands, and I'd be happy to share that with members if they haven't already seen it. Happy to take any questions if there are any on the specifics.
Appellate vorige. Christian, ik denk eens beer. Kom maar, mis nogal. Christopher gezien. Mr. McKenzie.
Yeah, just more comments actually. Having been to the annual Lewis and Harris horticulture shows, they've shown what can be grown. I'm not green fingered by any means. I can grow weeds, but I'm amazed at what they produced, over the year. And I don't think it's a hobby really. It'll be a work of necessity. I think the more that we can grow on the island, it's more important that we do so and encourage it in any way. Yeah, I mean, it's not just spuds and whatever, few cabbages. I mean, the variety of goods that can be grown on the island, particularly now with, the polytunnels and so forth. It's just amazing, quite amazing, and it should be encouraged and commercially produced too.
Haku, was je maar kan je tafelles? Zijn mooi nek 3 punten hun zo'n hinterger. Was de gaan nach gusper visserger moest zo'n ahooniger uist. En hij is zo'n visserger, is de kindje met planning grief, zo'n aanhooriger uist, dan planning grief, is naast een officer, hoonige in de vastklievigen. Na hask. Is Kathleen Morrison, is Karin Nikrori, en een short son Brinish hask, is Frakriat Kishin Sabi. Halch Kurat Karin Rish Gonna Manu. Sorry.
Clive, this report provides members with an update on the work of the Youth Repopulation Zone Working Group, which was formed following COHI decision to pilot measures to stem depopulation in selected areas. With support from the COHI subgroup, the local working group partners aim to reverse depopulation in the US through retaining its current population and both attracting people back to the islands, but also attracting new people to live here. Appendix 1 provides an overview of the action plan, which has been through community consultation, and lists the current long and short-term measures that are being developed and tackled by partners, trusts and local communities. Feedback from consultation included that more different types of housing is required throughout the US, and also that whilst jobs are here, it's the skilled people to do them that's lacking. This is a dynamic plan to ensure it always reflects the current needs, so it's always been updated. Whilst the plan is split into different sections of housing, jobs, infrastructure and skills, each action is co-dependent on each other. For example, different types of housing needs to be in place to attract people to live there. And whilst Gaelic is also specifically identified, is also running throughout the plan. The starkness of the recent release of Scotland's 2022 census data showing that the Outer Hebrides has a 5.5% decrease in this population and the highest in Scotland makes the work even more imperative. The current youth repopulation work is used as a pilot, and the lessons learned will and can be transferred throughout the islands. The Scottish Government is currently developing its Adapting Depopulation Action Plan to support the work, and is currently part funding with the Comhairle the Youth Settlement Officer post. And I'll pass you on to my colleague Karine McCreary for the report.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'll just give a very brief overview of the Settlement Officer's report. So the report covers the key data between May 2022 and July 2023. So between that time, I received 236 queries and supported 25 relocations to US, with a further 3 pending before the end of the year. So 79% of these queries are families looking for general relocation advice and housing queries. And within that, the 34% of those families are awaiting suitable housing to become available on the market for either purchase or long-term rent. Additional evidence of the housing issue is provided in data and statistics that are acquired in a settlement officer's questionnaire and 49% of relocators to use stated that finding suitable and affordable housing was the biggest barrier when they were settling in Uist. Several non-residents are successful in accepting job offers in Uist, but later find themselves unable to take the position since there's no accommodation available. But on a more positive note, as a result of COVID-19 and the flexibility and advantages of remote working, 14 families, which is almost 50% of families, have relocated or returned home to work from Uist and taken their jobs from the mainland. Key achievements, which are stated within the report, include the supporting the Uist Repopulation Zone working group and collaborating with various organisations on many projects. There's also I've been assisting the establishment of the USPO online website and socials, which encourages relocation and settlement within Uist. Work alongside the Scottish Childminding Association as well, and the investigation of childcare solutions has been a high priority also, as well as gathering key data on the ground and sharing the knowledge about the issues that people have moving into the area in the hope that it supports the development of further projects and initiatives to address the population decline. The report also includes the next steps going forward and just continuing to provide a high quality service to new and old residents in the community. Thank you, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank
you. Yeah, it's more a comment than a question. I think the work that's being done in the Uist Repopulation Zone and with the settlement office is vitally important. I mean, we heard the census data, as Kathleen mentioned earlier on. The figures are pretty stark, and I'm not saying we're ahead of the game because we're not. We're on the game. We're at it. We're seeing what the solutions could be, pulling together different kind of options for people who want to relocate to the islands. Very, very important work for what we're wanting to do as a Coria to ensure we've got the population to meet their future needs. So just thanks to Kathleen and Karine for their work. A lot of the issues are out with our control. It's more government level. There's things they need to be doing to ensure we've got proper connectivity in terms of transport, broadband, etc. So these are areas that maybe the population work can't cover, but I think we're doing as much as we can within this work to address the situation. So thanks again.
Yes, I welcome the report, and certainly it highlights, the good work that was done over a short period of time. And what is clear, from the report is lack of housing is coming key to. It's all right having employment in areas, but if you don't have anywhere to live, you won't be able to attract people. And it's similar to what was reported from Harris, where they're over the summer, they're not able to maintain the services they do have for the tourism sector. And as I mentioned earlier at CLLD from Harris, it was clear that the biggest challenge they do face in attracting people to areas is lack of housing, albeit, that it may be temporary housing. But what's coming out of the report is, along with having a job, that those folk need to have access to childcare facilities as well, which is key within any community. And though we're specific to the Uist, it clearly illustrates that the jobs are there, and the jobs are in many other rural areas out with Stornoway, and the jobs linked to that they must have a house to go with it, or else they won't come. So it just highlights that the islands are a place that's attractive to come to, and looking at the kind of wage structure that is provided in those is as good as on the mainland. So we're seeing now that there used to be a stigma attached to low wages, which is no longer the case. And one of the things that we have seen in Uist and in other rural areas is that the price of private housing has increased significantly over what it used to be, because that used to be one of the the things that could attract people to the island was low property prices, which is no longer the case. So social housing or housing for those that are needing housing for workers was being considered for Harris, and having a kind of a pilot area, a pilot development in Harris that would put up affordable housing for workers is desperately needed. And certainly this welcomes what the Comhairle has done. And the one thing is, how long, Leader, will this funding be available for the youth to continue on this pilot? I would hope, that funding will continue over the years to come.
Catherine, sorry.
Thank you. We've got funding from the COVID recovery funds that we've been using to support various projects throughout US so far. A community reporter, the USBO as examples, and we've also been using it to part fund the settlement officer. So this is the second year high, supported the first year, and the Scottish Government are supporting this year. We're unsure what's going to be happening so far after May next 2024. We're also looking to partners as well if there's any support there, and it's as I said, it's a long-term thing. So as the leader mentioned, we're working with Scottish Government to discuss different policies and how it affects the communities as well.
Rafa.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for the report. I mean, when we look at around the repopulation and recruitment as well, recently I had a meeting with, full meeting with quite a number of young mothers that could not go back to work because of lack of childminding places in North US. So obviously, when we talk about repopulation, when we have a workforce that's available but can't go back to work because of our childminding facility, that's another situation that presented recently, especially with young mothers as well, with school leavers, that the bus route that takes some of the workers to, especially from Lochmadi to North Hughes, been diverted, and people do not have access to attend their workplace. I mean, obviously there is an issue I'm raising with transport and education at the moment, but it's just to highlight the situation that small elements like this that can affect what we do in a bigger thing. So it'd be good to look at maybe how we can encourage or increase our capacity for providing childminding, especially to young mothers that are ready to go back to work.
Oh, sorry, Francis.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask if you were hopeful of filling the settlement officer post, which I see is currently vacant, and it's obviously vital to this work, and it would be a pity if there was a gap when the part funding is there available for 2023-24. If that post was vacant for too much of that time.
Thank you. We actually just did the interviews at the end of last week, and we have appointed, but we're just going through the process, so we can't announce it as of yet.
Tapalive and ask is Lord. Sorry, Mr. Kenson.
Thank you. Yeah, just one thing, which is a bit maybe, diverting things, but it's to do with housing, which is, as has been said, is tied up with jobs. So, housing's a vital part of it. And I raised this, a long time ago, I suppose, but, and I was told that supply and demand. But when you see Beerland Crofts going for, nearly $250,000 or whatever, and young people can't get either housing or a site or whatever. Is there anything we can look at? You know, I understand that there's other parts of the country, I'm talking about the UK, maybe Cornwall or Jersey or places like that, who, you know, can restrict sort of a flow of people coming in to give the younger ones locally a chance to buy houses or to get a site. I don't know what can be done. I mean, I'm told that it's supply and demand and you can't do anything about it, but it would seem, you know, possible in some places. So can we do it?
Let's Mr. McKay. And you like I'm machas a new drasakin. My the impression cause doing your kreutchen. Ach smash get a jesper good shin hoka like primary industry smog. Is Janu Brinish Royal das my ends commission kreutcherach. Ian Velusa security in his check the husperson. Mr. Husabi. No, Ian Watts, sorry. Ian Watson. The other Ian.
I thought I got out of that one there. Yeah, it's a key issue, and it's certainly one that's been brought to our attention in recent years, and something we're very conscious of as we come to shape the local housing strategy about how challenging it is to find land or a house for young people. Just want to flag out a couple of things that are being looked at the moment. We were successful in putting a bid into the UK Shared Prosperity Fund at the start of the year, and we've got some money for piloting a programme to support service plots. So we're doing that in partnership with Stories Uist and North Harris Trust at the moment. So we're very keen to see how that develops over the next wee while. But hopefully that would be something that would give us good information on what kind of demand's out there, what level of interest there is on these plots. And we're also looking at, you've probably seen from the appendix of the repopulation zone report, but the range of housing things that are being looked at just now to try and address the problem. But one of the things we're quite keen to explore is to try and see if we could use some existing council property that had been used as offices in Ballavani, going back many years. They're surplus to requirement just now, so we're trying to see if there's any way we could use these as gateway houses. So if young people, for example, are moving to Eilean to take up a post and they can't find a house or a plot of land, they could rent out that unit for 18 months or 2 years or something like that until they do find something. So that's something we're looking at the moment in consultation with our colleagues in the Scottish Government. So there are a number of things we're trying to look at, but like you're right enough, Councillor Mackenzie, it is a huge problem for young people in fine land, especially in years.
Okay, but sin göntoch is een daag zo'n tort van jaar. Appellijf. Wordt niet gekus voor 3 giak. Program yesterday in het toe was stuur in Harsnoch 23 to 24. En als wordt vis program CLLD in uw gauw, maar de ga je untoch leertels naar halve Sprini, Meira, Burn, de genages frikjes te bihag. Appellijf Meira.
Beleis garige. Ha nahis seo is an isi do bhil man op a chaidhéirnú agus a ha a thosaáin son program CLLD an jo leisig forstuúna coirsnoch. Program na blianasan na has an idir dhéirnú gurike seos na ha fanergain ach cúteach súladáis agus a bhuai a bheith program a nudí gusárit go socialta ach cúteach go economic goch. Hi siw go bhfuil Siar Amazon Siar príomh Amazon fanéir ganna lag sin bu stúdia hacan ha 3 cuairsin múnachaí go bhíacin ha sin is an líonra coirsnoch a háisiigh agus cúteach san ruta gan íonna thuh neodrach thuh carbon agus a bharcha sin ha an lag cumultaigrí youth lag buin studie ook. Sa Jimmy Chechna sas is buin shut. Hammer wel mandarna le you nog is a dolge parliament schúchel na halapus na Nieland sin Scottish Rural agus Islands Parliament in blionna. Agus hat nog is koersmu nog I a Comhairle pein sa 10,000 not achgus sin nu. Ha budget ac in a blionna de 3 keert een 60,000 sé, dulich 3 keert 60,000 not. Leg het not je na het kalpe agus je revenue has a gooie. Agus son hier uur een nuddy je realtas na halpe boeien CLLD een social value engine glachkes baha brokke houn ha tort zuul buai socialte projecten. Sashin schalten genchach Jimmy dag dulich kiert kirfich het 10,000 not hosk agus gnane gemachchen buai hoschelte de choris och kiert 1,000 not. Maar schon haben es mich exempel waar hon ha schalten genomen waren gewel CLLD a kopig ach kuch gokuter mag se ha huf Amazon socialte. Agus ha mit holichtje frekkers wel kischen se mir ha go rekerst.
Blesse meira. Kische bieg. Christelijk zo uitermach schutz muur gewelle nadat het de Januus de grondstokken naar in kunnen toe. Mr. Mackenzie.
One question really. We used to see signs everywhere in the islands of it, supplied by the EU. I mentioned leader here and so forth. We were told pre-Brexit, of course, that the UK government would provide the funds to take up, what was supplied before by the EU. Has that happened? I mean, do we get the same amount of funds from the UK government that we were used to get from the EU? I don't see many signs up anyway, like we used to.
Nou, let me gaan je zien fijn. Nou, waar je fijn van een EU-iets van een weertes get wat het orgaan gauwer commissioner tachert. Ach, je kunt nou, als je les na haasje fijn, trouwens CLLD, als je janu magariru, les nationale te haken, tortaika projecten. Ach, als je janu person tort verhoor, weertes dan shin. Gaan is minister Realtus Lord Offord, voor je Mother Offord, voor je daar kunnen als je Johnny Point, waar we in het jaar nu, maar je naar de jouw gegaan, naar het als je fijn is, zo naar het te waar je fijn van de EU, zoals je Johnny Keuze kwestie tot panier Realtus gewel, akuter mag gewel, je femige barok, daar has je fijn genaamd. Is je haar naastje son. Sorry.
Did you get a reply as to what will happen then?
Who got board in the point in the machine Gianu? Had to seen Gavos a beaker or an arrogation to go in art. So als je niet maar zijn jullie unterricht de morgen ik 3 point geheen. Als je niet zo goed is, kusper keer jerk, kast chiowik, dieswok in het doel, na hebben zijn eisen tot vestig met program kast chiowik, dieswok in het doel, na hebben harische af meegerig. Gaan je tarmet en shows een paar dood overeen een husper show.
Dat had je. Han Scotland local gift card schema show we told kopen dus voor een halve % Leon. Ze hebben de nice katie dus een commodity program SLL zo'n Leon hele. Dus je gaat nu er een hartje lachen als een skier gewoon je als niet kan nog ik wil nog het verder als een skier ergens het teig door die was in het agus fa chuid nasig go scríomh a barach gníomhachas an anamar politische scéime agus an neif cóir leichet gníomhachas acin an gháragar fag na heile. Bín an tálaite ceiste mí, fiachan ceiste mí agad.
Appel Roon, wel Kirstenberg, Eilean en Guspershaw. Maar een heel handig mooi en 3 pointen hun. Dus ik was go Kusper Koog Diak, Bille Kies Hoogtaal. En als je tot visserig en Bille Kies Hoogtaal, Auerbe, als je schierig unte getaklich in Eliasachig, als frakkerd, kuchongolische nationte hele willen. Toen nog hopelijk untoch. Compáisteach economicach rianol na gealtoch eis na Hillan. Eis ha Catherine an a seo san brinis náisic.
This report reintroduces members to the Visitor Levy Scotland Bill and to invite the Comhairle to develop proposals to take forward the scheme locally should it be approved in Parliament. It's currently at stage 1. At the 2019 committee series, members agreed that they would support the levy, and this report provides more information on the proposed bill, which will add either a small percentage or a set fee to all overnight accommodation stays. This includes hotels, self-caterings, campsites and marinas, and the income generated needs to be spent on local tourism and visitor infrastructure and development projects. Community and instant engagement is essential and mandatory when developing the scheme and to take it forward efficiently. Due to the current fluctuating visitor trends post-COVID, Outer Hebrides Tourism have looked at their 2018-19 occupancy and visitor surveys and estimated that this could potentially result in an annual income of approximately £1.3 million to be spent locally. A proportion of the income is also to be used to support the administration of the scheme. And as the national consultation on the levy closed last Friday, the Comhairle submission was caveated that there was an officer's view based on members' previous discussions. Comments were also in line with the agreements at the Regional Economic Partnership and their consultation response, which included the Comhairle. Points highlighted include that the scheme should not be a one-size-fits-all, island proofing to be taken into account, and that the eligibility notably does not include campers not booked into paid-for sites or the cruise sector. Cruises becoming a significant proportion of visitor numbers to Lewis and Haddis, and we saw that yesterday in the town. However, it's been floated, part of the pun, that compensation from this group may be dealt with through the Verity House agreement instead of going through the levy. Happy to take any questions.
Appelets, Kathleen Kirstenberg, Vice McCormick.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. The only thing that's been brought to my attention on this particular issue is concern by individuals as to how they are to collect this levy. How, just exactly what is the process for that, and a concern that there might be an increase in workload, or alternatively concerns that they weren't keen on doing, if you like, the government's work, sort of thing. And the type of businesses have always been reluctant to be having to collect things like VAT and that type of thing. That's the kind of way I'm thinking. So have you had any kind of reaction, much reaction like that? I wasn't clear from the report whether you had much reaction like that, reluctance from individuals to be involved.
Thank you. We've been consulting with Outer Hebrides Tourism, and whilst they haven't gone out to their members, they do recognise the potential that the income can do. We're at the very start of the process at the moment, but we are mindful that the accommodation sector has gone through a lot with the short-term lets and the fallout of the COVID and everything else that's been thrown out into their way lately. So we will be going consulting with them more lately. Collecting the levy is still up for discussions. It's in comparison to other areas, it's just added to the cost stats when you pay for it at that time. And we're going to be discussing with in-house finance as well, and the various ways to do that through the REP, the Regional Economic Partnership. It's also looking at how we can share costs and to develop the ways to the processes to administrate the scheme.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I do recall some time ago there was a discussion that a levy would be per passenger coming by ferry or by plane. I wonder if that would be a better way of doing it. And I have been asked the question, if I go down to Harris and stay for a few nights, do I have to pay the levy because I am a local person? These are questions I have been asked.
Kathleen? Sorry, Kathleen. Some get the lights on. Too many lights on. Kathleen?
Between British and Gorge not my unit, we will be. It really depends because it has been mentioned that because we do have a board or a simple board of how to collect it, that could be a way, but everything is still in discussions at the moment. And there is also going to be, sorry, I should add that there will also be situations for if people are going away to funerals or to hospital, or if you are local as well, that's still in discussions as well, if there's some criteria that to go around there.
Rema, wie measure Finnekens, was the full like a crioche collective levy. Measure yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah.
All right.
I've had exactly the same observations as you have, Angus. Exactly the same. It's to do with administration, really, and I think that the small-time tourist industry, which is the B&Bs and the Airbnbs, and these are the ones that are most concerned. I know the hotels won't like it either, because it's another administration, more costs to them, and they've been hit quite badly lately. These people, especially with this forms that they have to sign in, and they have to do every sort of test under the sun. You wonder where on earth they're going to stop the testing. But and I think that it's good that you're going to actually consult, and to consult with these, not with the board, but with the individuals, with a group of individuals, because these are small-time individuals who are doing it it's almost a cottage industry. And we don't want to put these cottage industries off by adding, I think this, if you're at £200, it's about a 10%, £2 or something like that. But yet that means administration every day. So I think that it's good to actually consult with them before we go any further.
Suspicion of word son a chomóliche wie in August.
Yeah, just the list of people who will be affected by that, and there's A to J or whatever. That there will be problems with that, no doubt. But I think what's important here, that the camper vans or motorhomes, campers, and of course the cruise ships. I think these are the two things actually that should be paying the levy, and somehow we should be, looking to incorporate that in, whether it's a levy paid to the harbour authority and then, used for facilities. Everything that's raised obviously should be ring fenced, and I assume that would be the bottom line for facilities such as toilets and parking and so forth. So yeah, I mean, it's got to come, but I think these two should be right top of the list, actually.
Mr. Kenny, Francis.
Just thanks, Chair, following on from Mr. Mackenzie there. It does say that there is flexibility for local authorities to come up with their own schemes. It's hoped that will enable local authorities to select a preferred regional approach. I just wondered, is there any flexibility to change the list at 6.2, or is that going to be a nationally set list?
Question?
So, thank you. So far, it's a set list, but we have included in the response, the consultation response, that the comments about the campers that aren't included in for the paid for sites and the cruise ships, to highlight that, because it is a significant portion, both of them, in the islands.
Okay. Cannard.
Thank you. Just briefly at Cosland Regional Economic Partnership, one of the areas in terms of cruise ships specifically is the fact that they come on and off on the same day. So people have looked at overnight levies, so when people are staying in hotels, but with this, it's like a day tripping levy. So it's just, you know, the nuance around just exactly what we're going to be looking at and trying to take money in from, just to, so people are aware these discussions are happening across the sector.
Yes. Clefa kish biaga Daniel yin Chris Mana Hill ha committee kundig na mawin ek 3 point hen. Lai as grutig dianatus as kin has the heen sa shunnus on fistig. As being committee kanjach gericht de dochgewa fichet kan an having. As tapelover son of shown you Irwinus as in Homa as son toch kan you. Tapelove.